Hey, this is a response video for Laci, and then, for whoever else may see this that it might help, I guess. Laci, you and I had kind of briefly emailed each other about the heart stuff, and I wanted to make sure I got back to you. For anybody who's seeing this and may have seen my early videos when I first started, and I talked about some of my medical stuff at that time, I had mentioned, I didn't really go into much detail, but I had mentioned that I had had heart surgery. And now that Laci, you're kind of dealing with some issues, I just wanted to make sure that you kind of had some of the details about what I went through. That way, I'm not saying you have the same thing, but maybe at least it might help you figure out or ask questions or whatever. So I kind of wanted to tell you some of my symptoms, what I went through. What I had, it's called supraventricular tachycardia, SVT for short. It's extremely common. Like so common, like 1 out of every 5 or 10 people or something like that have it. It's just in a form that really doesn't affect people. It's not a severe form. However, I had a much more severe form of it that when all this kind of came to a head for me, we found out that it actually ran in my family. Doesn't necessarily mean that it has to run in your family, but it did for me. Supraventricular tachycardia is extremely hard to diagnose. I had it my entire life, although I really didn't notice it until I was like in my early teens, and even then it would only be every now and then. It was really minor, and it never really fazed me, so I didn't think a whole lot about it. It got worse with age. My symptoms would be, at least early on, I could be sitting doing absolutely nothing, sitting watching TV, doing nothing at all, and all of a sudden it would be like somebody came over and just kind of punched me in the chest. And it was that quick and that sudden that my heart would just start going boom, 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 boom. And it was just a hard, fast heartbeat. Really strange. And in the very beginning, it was not really all that hard, but it was enough for me to notice, and it was fast enough for me to notice, but it wasn't anything really severe. And I remember telling my mom, and my mom always thought it was like anxiety or whatever, and she'd say something like, "Oh, Angie, you're just stressed out," or, you just got to calm down, or whatever. She didn't think anything of it either, because it didn't happen very often. It wasn't anything major. It would usually correct itself within 10, 20, 30 seconds or whatever. And I'd be like, okay, I don't know what the heck that was, but whatever. As I got older, it seemed to get more frequent and a little more severe. When I actually moved to Minnesota, I think I was about 18 or 19 years old. That's when things really started to get bad, like all of a sudden. And that's, Laci, if you have noticed kind of weird things in the past with your heart, and now it's kind of like all of a sudden it seems like these things are getting worse or whatever, this is kind of a thought to keep in your head. Maybe you've possibly had it before and it's just getting worse now, whatever. That's what happened with me. I moved up here, and God, I remember being over at my sister's apartment one time, and I swear it felt like somebody came up out of nowhere and just wham, just punched me in my chest so hard. My heart just started just pounding out of my chest. So hard. And it was fast, like boom, 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 boom. And enough to the point where I had to like sit on the floor, and I was like, whoa, and I really couldn't breathe that well because my heart was beating so fast and so hard that breathing just felt funny. And I remember calling my mom, and I was in tears. I'm like, do you remember that heart thing I used to go through? Well, now it's doing it again, and it's worse, and blah, blah. And again, she was thinking anxiety or whatever, and so that's what I tried to kind of blow it off as. So anyway, that happened a few times, and it just seemed to get more frequent and more frequent and more severe. And each time I would have an episode, it would last for longer. What used to be 10 or 20 or 30 seconds would now be 5 minutes, 10 minutes, you know, and worse. And so I started going to the doctor, and they did all kinds of tests on me, just like, you know, Laci, what you've recently had, an echocardiogram, and all kinds of other, you know, just basic tests where they, you know, just, you know, stethoscope and they listen to you and blah, blah, blah. Or I had, I don't know what the different tests are called, MRI or whatever. I had something where they actually inject you with a dye, and just about every single test under the sun, and everything would always come back okay. It always came back okay. And I'm like, well, something is obviously not okay here because this keeps happening. Well, it did it to me one more time, or another time, and I ended up going to the emergency room, and by the time I made it to the emergency room, of course, it had stopped doing it. But at least that doctor at that time said, well, I believe you. I believe something's actually going on, so I'm going to have you wear this Holter monitor. So they actually gave me this big contraption Holter monitor thing. I had electrodes all over me, just like what you would get if you went into the hospital and they were trying to monitor your heartbeat. All these electrodes, you know, I had to have all over me and wear this monitor home. I had to wear it for 24 hours. And if it happened to do it during that time, I was to hit the button so it would start recording my heart rate. Well, it didn't do it during that 24 hours. It only did it, you know, maybe once or twice or 3 times at most a month. So I even told him, I'm like, I highly doubt that I'm going to catch it on this Holter monitor. And I didn't. So, you know, this is just one more thing that I had to do for them to tell me, sorry, we can't figure it out. What finally ended up happening on July 5th of 97, I believe it was, I was in my apartment alone. It started doing it, and my heartbeat was just hard and fast and furious, and it wouldn't stop. Would not stop. It had gotten to the point within those few months that it would go for 20 and 30 minutes without stopping, as far as that hard beat. And I had to just sit back and kind of breathe through it and relax and whatever, and it would correct itself after that long. And that day I thought it was going to do the same thing. And so I sat on my couch and I'm like, oh, here we go again. And I just sat there, and 20 minutes go by, 30 minutes go by, 45 minutes go by. And by this time, because your heart is beating so hard and so fast for that long, I was getting really, really, really dizzy. I was having a much harder time breathing. I ended up having to go to my bedroom and lay on my bed. I didn't want to call an ambulance. Well, keep in mind, at the time, I did not have health insurance, which sucked. So I didn't want to call an ambulance because I'm thinking I don't have health insurance. Plus, it's just doing the same thing as it always does. It'll correct itself, no big deal. That's just my personality. I tend to blow things off. So anyway, I'm laying there, and I think about an hour and 15 minutes, hour and a half had gone by, something like that, and it still had not stopped. And I really had gotten to the point where I was starting to get very, very, very scared because I couldn't even hardly function anymore. My heart was beating so hard, I was doing this with my heart because it was just like, you know. And I couldn't hardly talk because I couldn't breathe very well. And so I started making phone calls to my friends. And I remember saying, I got everybody's voicemail. I'm like, hey, don't want to worry you or anything. I just need to go to the emergency room. Call me when you can. I mean, it was like, you know, I didn't want to worry anybody, but yet I was trying to talk. Oh, it was just weird. So I couldn't get a hold of anybody except for I finally got a hold of a friend of mine, Ryan, who lived on the 3rd floor in the same apartment building, black guy. Awesome, awesome guy. And the only reason why I say his color, is because when he saw me, if a black guy can turn white in a second, he did. That poor guy. When I called him, all I could really say was, heart, help, heart, help. That's all I could really get out. And he's like, I'll be right down. And when I hung up, I realized, oh my God, my door is locked. And so I tried to get myself out of my bed, and I am falling out of my bed, crawling across the floor to the front door. I reached up and unlocked it and like practically passed out. Not totally passed out, I was still there, but I like couldn't function. And so when he got there, he had to like push me out of the way. I was in front of the door and he had to like push me out of the way. He scoops me up, we get in my car, and he drove my car. I remember telling him, don't crash my car.